Welcome to the Psychology Club podcast, brought to you by Vicente Martinez High School.
Welcome to the Psychology Club podcast. Today we're talking with Lisa, the executive director of the Contra Costa Crisis Center. I'm Michaela, and what is the mission of the Contra Costa Crisis Center?
Well, thank you for asking. Yes, I am Lisa Malol. I'm the executive director at the Contra Costa Crisis Center. We are the people that answer all the calls and chat and text for 988 Suicide Prevention and Crisis Line for Contra Costa County. We also run the 211 Resource and Referral Line.
Okay.
So when you call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year, you will call us and you will get a person. So we're the people that always answer your call every time. We also do disaster preparedness. We coordinate with the county on that. So when there's a disaster and information and resources need to be disseminated, people will call 211 and say, what do I do? Where do I go? Also, if there's power shutdowns, we do some of that work. We have grief counseling and group programs for people, whether they're survivors or of suicide attempts or family members, and people are grouped into, or if they've lost a child, so people are grouped into different categories. And then the other, there's so many different things that we do. Oh, and then also mobile grief response. So very unfortunately, I think for people that read the news, like in Valley Verde Elementary School, there were two young people whose parents were murdered, the mother and the mother-in-law. And so, we go out, in fact, we're going tomorrow, to go and work with the teachers to really help them process and understand how to work with students. I mean, they certainly know and have information, but it's really good for, a suicide crisis line people to be there and to be able to listen and advise, and often just times like have anxiety like offloaded.
Yeah.
So those are the things that we do. I can say more about the people that we work with, like who's part of our center and what that looks like, or we can move on to another question.
I was gonna say you can keep going with what they
With
do.
some of that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So how we are structured is we actually are in a physical building, right? Some people are virtual and do things virtually. We have everyone on site because overall, our agency, we are a very dynamic and collaborative team. Okay, because crisis line response, it's really, people call it a call center, but it's really a care center, because all of these lines, you're not calling AT&T, right? You're calling a warm and compassionate person who's highly trained in listening, helping to identify what the issue of the moment is, how to help de-escalate if there's an immediate crisis, right? If someone's immediately going to be harming themselves, can you do you have the item of self-harm in your hand? Would you feel comfortable putting it on the other side of the room, right? Really small, getting involved in those very small, discrete steps so that then we can work with the person and hopefully identify maybe what the triggers were, what their support system is, and then ultimately have them feel a bit calmer and have a safety plan of what are they going to do next, and then we'll do a follow-up.
Okay.
Right? So all of our staff, we have extensive 988 training, how to work with, people in crisis. We're accredited by the American Association of Suicidology. We have our accreditation through 988. To give a little bit of context on that, 988, it used to be the Lifeline, right? So you might remember the Lifeline, and there was a phone number for the Lifeline.
Yeah, it was like a long little phone number.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then a few years ago, what the federal government and the state governments wanted to do was create a 3-digit number,
Which is
easy to
smarter.
remember, and so to have that, and then to have that consistent across the country.
My name is Kamala, and what are some of the main services your center provides?
So so there's actually a lot of things that we provide to people when they call in. So I was explaining with 988, so there's all different kinds of services they might need. They might need food. They might need shelter. They might need a counselor. They might need health care. They might need just someone to come and sit with them and keep them safe. They may need perhaps a guidance counselor might be a trusted person, how to connect with your friend or how to ask for help. Sometimes people need a shelter bed, somewhere to sleep. Those things happen. Sometimes people are living on the street. How do we help and connect them and sometimes provide housing vouchers when there are programs for that? And that's the same 211. People, sometimes they just call and they're like, I can't find childcare. We're like, great. These are, places in your area or in your neighborhood or resources where you can go to find out more. Sometimes, we get a lot of calls for people that need shelter beds. We also sometimes get calls, with some frequency, about people that are really having significant mental health crises. And then our purpose with that is to be as least invasive as possible. So if there's for example, if there's a situation where there's potentially a violent act against someone else and there's a mental health involvement, we will refer that call to the A3 Miles Hall Center because they do behavioral health immediate outreach to the location to help mitigate what that issue is, to collaborate with law enforcement so that some of the, crises that we've had of unnecessary death, or injury don't happen, right? So then we might connect people that way. We also, when we're talking with people, less typically with 988 callers, but with 211 callers, we ask them, is your power shut off? Are you having trouble paying your phone bill or your electric bill? Because there are programs for this. You're having transportation issues? Are you wanting a electric car? There's programs for this. Are you, in need of, are you in need of grief support? Is your family member, sometimes family members will call for someone else. Just because you're a family member, you still need support, and we're there to provide that. These services are for everyone.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Saya. Does someone have to be in a crisis to call or text the 988 number?
Each individual can decide what they need. If you need help, if you need someone to talk to, if you're just feeling alone in your room and it feels lonely, you can call the crisis line. That's what the crisis line is there for. And you can do chat text. It doesn't need to be crisis, right? All it needs to be is, I need some help getting through this moment, and that's what we're there for. And for us, for the center, and I would say for all the centers that exist, no one is judging your level of crisis any more than they would be judging someone who has a full-blown crisis need and calls in. That's what we're there for. So, and this goes for whether a person individually you're feeling a crisis, or if your friend is feeling a crisis and you're feeling really worried about them and don't know what to do. That's a crisis call.
Hi, my name is Jayla, and I was wondering how many people in Contra Costa County use the hotline every day and every year on average?
The crisis line, 988 line, receives, you're probably good at math too, receives 35 to 37,000 calls a year. And those are answered calls, okay? Those are people that we speak with. The 211 line actually mirrors, it's like the same number, which is, I don't, it's very strange. Like you look at the numbers, it's like, really? But it really is. So we get the same number of calls. And they're not duplicated. You know, there's the system that we have, it's very clear where the calls are coming from, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no, you know, double dipping on the numbers to inflate numbers. Those are the numbers. And so what does that come to? 7,000 calls a month for on the 988 and 7,000-ish on the, right? I think I'd come up with, I'd had a number at some point, so that's what I'm remembering. So yeah, so it's, and it varies. So it's not the same every day or at every time of day. So sometimes in the overnight, like graveyard shift, very quiet. Sometimes it's very active. I can say that chat text is active all the time. There are so many, in fact, chat text communications that nationally we're having trouble keeping up with that because it really has become a primary mode of communication. And then looping back to the training piece on that, it's a whole additional training because the pace of communication is different. How to listen and respond to those communications are different. They're much longer engagements, right? A typical chat text might be an hour and a half, right? Because it's just totally different processing. So it's very different skills. We like for people to have call experience before we move on to chat text experience.
Hey, my name is Gavin, and what would you say is the average wait time for the 988 hotline? And what happens when people are on hold? Like how often?
We have a 95% answer rate, which is very high. So that means that 95% of the calls that come in are answered, and that they're answered within, I think, between 45 seconds and a minute. If people are on hold, there is, information on there, that their call will be responded to and so on and so forth to sort of keep them calm. With 988, not 211, calls that aren't responded to will roll over to another center. So for example, if let's say there were 100 additional calls beyond what the immediate capacity was, they would roll somewhere else. Now, the benefit of, and the resources are shared, so people know in other places what the local resources are. The reason why the 988 lines and 211 lines are typically housed in community-based organizations, and by that I mean 501c3s, and by that I mean nonprofit organizations, is because it's the nonprofit organizations that typically are much deeper embedded in community, smaller programs, have more, direct relationships, so that when we're providing either 211 or 988 services, we know the person at the program that we might be referring to. We have relationships to do perhaps a warm handoff. You're not asking someone to call another number. We're, kind of handing it off that way. And so those are some of the nuances.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
What are some ways hotline counselors have helped people?
So many ways, so many ways. In the case of different callers that might call in, we will automatically talk with them with as much time as they need, walk them through the process, connect them with 911, connect them with behavioral health services. And so I can't tell you the number of calls that we've had in that regard. And those are our high flag, high risk calls. Okay. So we help people in that way. We also have people who need a lot of youth who need shelter beds. And there are not a lot of shelter beds available for youth, right? So there's the county, the cities keep working on expanding the services, right? We read about that, we hear about that, and they're making like huge efforts to do that. And so that's really important. On the other hand, we get all these calls and there aren't enough resources. So what we will do is keep working with that person, doing exhaustive outreach to actually call while we are with that person to try to find, is there something open here? Is there something open there? Did something just open up? Did a person just leave? And really working to actually make that happen. So it's not, okay, there's nothing, gotta go. It's our staff typically, in fact, someone gave me a list of what they do, a lot of their circumstances yesterday, and really trying to, work with them. Sometimes we're able to find things, sometimes we're not, but we also do call and follow up with people to see what's happened next, if they've found a place, and then, try to, like, if we do find out that there's a space, like, reach out and try to make those connections. The other thing that we do is that we don't stop at that point. So part of our program, so you have to remember that with these different programs, we're connected to the county agencies, we're connected to the schools, right? We're connected to the county supervisors, we're connected to every single little program that exists in the very big Contra Costa County and the health, all their health programs and things. So we'll give them feedback, right? Because we need to do reporting to them and let them know, right? Who's called, what's been the outcome of that. Yeah. So we give feedback, like there's all of this stuff happening, but there isn't enough services. So we can show in real time how that's working or not working. Yeah. And then maybe the criteria is wrong. So maybe, so sometimes the person needs, there was an older adult who needed a shelter bed, but then they have these programs, not us, we're the amplifiers of all these different programs. It's like they have requirements. So are they of this age? Are they of this income? Are they without a home? Or is it just that they can't get in their home? And so you have all of these, so you might have 30 requirements. So if they met the first 10, but then they don't meet the next 20, they're out of luck. Well, that's extremely upsetting for our counselors, right? For our care center folks. So they will just try to work around it, figure it out, get back to the agency. Like we've had conversations like, this is too many questions. No one will ever you have these services, no one will ever be able to access them. We've received X number of calls, they can't access the resource because the requirements are too high. And then we collaborate with these agencies to work it out, right? Because they want people to connect to the services. That's why they have the services. They're not trying to stop people from having services, right? The county wants people to get the services that they need. So we're part of that process and helping them, figure it out based on the data, the people that we're helping.
Thank you.
Let's say a minor calls the hotline. Would you guys share their private information with their guardians? Yes or no?
No. That's not, we're going to work it through with them. There can be circumstances where we might need to reach out to Child Protective Services, right? If it's that case. The de-escalation goal is to, who is there, is your parent in the house? Can you talk to your parent? Can you bring your parent into the room? Can they help you? What kind of help, and kind of working up to those sorts of things. So our goal is to meet the need, the immediate need and the immediate risk of the person, identify what their immediate risk is, right, in that very minute, identify what their supports are, right? So you have the person calling, you have the risk assessment, what are the immediate risk, what the supports are they willing to bring in those supports, sort of having that conversation with them, and then moving forward from that. So it's not minor call parent or minor do something else. But if the suicidology risk is a very high risk, it would be treated really the same way as it is for any adult, right? So the idea is that we want to be the least possible invasive with any person. But there are cases where, it's unavoidable. But privacy, confidentiality, any sharing of information. It's also, we're bound by HIPAA, by the healthcare privacy laws. So, there's quite a lot. We don't share people's information, and so on.
What are other crisis numbers or help numbers we should know about?
I would say the main numbers are obviously 988 and the 988 chat text, the 211, which you spoke about for local resources, and then for mobile mental health crisis response to contact the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub, because they're the people. If you think 911 is about to be called, or it's like, oh my gosh, you can call 911 and them, or you can just call them to get things started. Again, if you're in a situation, and their number is 833-433-2672, and then of course 911. Right. So I would say that, and then also just to say, if you called 988 in that emergency and it was something that should be sent to behavioral health, we will do that. Okay. So we will refer to them. We will connect you with them, so so in a sense, you can't get it wrong. If you call 988, that'll still happen. If you call 211, that's still going to happen. Okay. Or if you, because it can be harder to remember that phone number as opposed to 988, 211, 911, which is why they created the 988 number. So those are, I would say, the primary numbers. I would also say, find your trusted adult or friend, but definitely, no matter what the crisis is that you're feeling, reach out for help. The largest unserved population are all the people that need help that don't ask for it. I will just add, it takes a lot when you're feeling vulnerable, to ask for what you need and to dial 3 numbers. And we really recognize that. I know I recognize that. And that's why every single call that we receive is important. The person is valued. There's no judgment. We recognize the courage that it takes when you're feeling so vulnerable to reach out. And so, thank you for trusting us for the 70,000 calls we receive a year overall. Thank you for trusting the Contra Costa Crisis Center.
Does that conclude everything? Thank you for joining us, Lisa.
Thank you. You're also charming. Thank you for inviting me to talk with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for teaching us all this, and thank you for all watching. And smash that like button, subscribe, hit all the notifications.
Yeah.
We're out.